All right, let's dive into a really complex story of alleged massive fraud coming out of Minnesota. It's got everything. Jaw-dropping amounts of money, a huge political fight, and it's hitting some of the state's most vulnerable people the hardest.
So, the whole thing just blew up in the public eye with this quote from a top federal prosecutor. I mean, listen to that language. Staggering industrial scale fraud. Right away, you know we're not talking about a few bad apples here. This sets the tone for something absolutely massive.
And here's the number at the center of it all: $9 billion. It's almost hard to wrap your head around, right? So here's the deal. Prosecutors are looking at 14 state-run Medicaid programs. Since 2018, they've paid out about $18 billion. And the bombshell claim is that half, or maybe even more of that, could be pure fraud. That's how we get to $9 billion. This led prosecutors to coin a new term, and it's pretty wild: fraud tourism. I mean, can you imagine? The idea is that the system in Minnesota was seen as so easy to exploit that it literally became a destination, a magnet for people all over the country who were looking to score what they called easy money.
So, how did this fraud tourism actually work? Well, this case from Philadelphia is a perfect example. You've got two guys who hear a rumor that Minnesota's housing program is easy money. So what do? They literally fly to Minnesota, sign their companies up for the program, then fly right back home to Philly. From there, they just started sending in fake claims and managed to get $3.5 million. Suddenly, that huge, abstract $9 billion number feels a lot more real, doesn't it?
Okay, so when stuff like that starts happening, you can bet the federal government is going to notice. And their response? It was massive. I mean, just take a look at this list. We're not talking about one or two agencies. Someone called it an avalanche of investigations, and that feels about right. You've got Treasury, Justice, Labor, Homeland Security, even the Small Business Administration, and the House Oversight Committee. It's like every corner of Washington, D.C. decided to jump in. And it's not just a lot of agencies, it's a lot of programs, too. They're looking at everything. We're talking Medicaid, unemployment, food stamps, those PPP loans from the pandemic. They're even looking into potential fraud with immigrant visas and something called ghost students in schools. It's incredibly broad. So, as you can probably guess, when you get this much federal heat on a state government, things get political. Fast. And that's exactly what happened here. A massive political showdown erupted. And it really boils down to two completely different stories. You have the federal side saying that state officials, right up to Governor Tim Walz, either looked the other way or just flat out failed to stop the theft of taxpayer money. Then you have the state's response, which is basically, this isn't about fraud. It's a coordinated political attack on the governor because he's a critic of the administration. Here's that federal perspective in a nutshell. This is from the chairman of the House Oversight Committee, and he's not mincing words. He's basically saying the governor and attorney general are turning a blind eye to the problem, and now Congress has no choice but to step in. And then, here's the comeback from the governor's office. Their take? This is a coordinated political attack, pure and simple. They're saying it's an attempt to shut up a critic. So you've got this classic tug of war, with both sides accusing the other of just playing politics. So you have to wonder, right? How did we get here? A $9 billion investigation doesn't just pop up overnight. Well, the truth is, it started with something else entirely. A completely different scandal that first put Minnesota on the federal radar. The whole thing really kicked off with a case involving a nonprofit called Feeding Our Future. Now, this group was supposed to be feeding hungry kids during the pandemic, but a huge fraud case blew up around them, and that is what brought all this federal attention to Minnesota and basically paved the way for everything we're seeing now. And just to be clear, that first scandal was no small thing. We're talking about $250 million. That's $250 million that prosecutors say was stolen, money that was supposed to buy meals for kids. So here's a quick breakdown of how that original scheme worked. During the pandemic, the nonprofit would submit phony invoices and fake lists of kids they claimed to be feeding. And it worked for a while. The feds eventually caught on, charging more than 75 people. But here's the key part. A state audit later came out and slammed the Minnesota Department of Education for missing all the red flags. And that's what really opened the door to questions about state oversight. Okay, so we've talked about the big numbers and the political fights. But it's really important to remember that this whole thing has had a massive real-world impact on actual people and communities in Minnesota.
the rhetoric has also gotten pretty ugly and personal. Because many of the defendants in these cases are Somali American, President Trump specifically targeted Minnesota's Somali community with comments like this one. It's obviously added a very charged and difficult layer to an already complicated situation. Now, there's a rumor that's been floating around that's really important to address, that this money was funding terrorism. But federal investigators have been very clear on this point. They found no evidence that any of this money went to the terror group al-Shabaab. In fact, the U.S. attorney who was on the case said most of the money went to luxury cars, real estate, things for the fraudsters themselves. And the consequences go way beyond just words. They're tangible. For example, that Housing Stabilization Program, the fraud tourism one, it was completely shut down. That means people who actually needed that help were just cut off. You've got disabled people whose care is now in limbo, and these crackdowns have created a real sense of fear in immigrant communities.
So where are we now? Well, we're kind of stuck in the middle of this standoff. You've got the feds and the state government both pointing fingers, each claiming they're the ones fighting for accountability and that the other side is just playing politics.
And you can see the concrete steps each side has taken. The federal government is going full steam ahead with its investigations, demanding documents and interviews. Meanwhile, Minnesota shut down that housing program. They've hired a new head of program integrity, and they're putting out their own fraud fact sheet to try and control the story. Which brings us to the big, lingering question in all of this. I mean, there's no doubt that there was a massive, massive failure here. But the response has gotten so wrapped up in politics, it's become almost impossible to tell where the real hunt for accountability ends and where the political battle begins. And it really makes you wonder, what's the final price tag going to be